everyone. The time is now 5 p.m. and the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convened in a special board meeting on Thursday, August 31, 2023. A quorum of board members is present. This meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551. I want to welcome the members of our audience to this meeting. As the Belton ISD Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports, approve budgets, contracts, personal appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve concerns and issues. This is a meeting of the Board of Trustees held in public, not a public meeting. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items may not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. This meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. A recording of the meeting will be available on the district's website in the days following tonight's meeting. For the video to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and the cell phones are turned off or in the silent mode. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and for your interest in Belton ISD. The first item on the agenda is public comments. None? All right. There being no public comments, we will move on to action items. Our action items this evening are as follows. A1, resolution to claim a good cause exception regarding Texas House Bill 3, and A2, consider, discuss, and take appropriate action regarding RFP number 2308-275-316 for armed security guard services. Dr. Schmidt?
I'd like to invite Mike Morgan up. Mike will walk you all through a very brief presentation tonight. As you know, there were some legislative changes that happened. House Bill 3 was passed in the recent legislative session, and school districts around the state are responding appropriately to the requirements of House Bill 3. Mike will walk you through those requirements, what we're doing, and also the RFP is directly associated with this as well.
Thanks, Dr. Smith. Good evening, board. I would like to take a few minutes just to give you a brief walkthrough of a portion of the Texas House Bill 3 requirements, and then tonight it will be specific to the requirement to have the armed security on each campus. One thing about the House Bill 3, we have had partners throughout this process. You know, the initial legislation proposed in the spring during the legislative session, we relied heavily upon information that we've been able to get from Texas Education Association, and we've also had conversations with our partners at Region 12 and with Texas School Safety Center throughout. So this is it's a process that all school districts in Texas have been going through, and we're thankful for the partners that we've had to sort through the legislation and make sure that we, number one, come up with a plan that's in compliance with the new legislation, but also come up with a standard that suits well for BISD. Some of the Texas House Bill 3 requirements specific to what we're talking about tonight, and this is language specifically from the legislation which has been added to the Texas Education Code, is that every school district in Texas is required to have at least one armed security officer to be present during regular school hours at each district campus. A basic standard was created in the legislation where the armed security officer was defined as either a school district peace officer, a school district resource officer, or a commissioned peace officer employed as security, basically on an after hours or part-time basis. Belton ISD does not have a school district police force, so that ruled out option 1 of a school district police officer. Belton ISD does employ nine school resource officers from our partnerships with the City of Belton, City of Temple Police Departments, who are valued partners and who we've had long-standing relationships of providing SROs for our campuses and do an outstanding job providing that service. One of the things, so ultimately when the legislation was signed into law, one of the first things we looked at is what our options were to be in compliance. And we did look at the possibility of could you provide a school resource officer at every campus. And we've talked with our local partners, also with Bell County Sheriff's Department, and with there being well over 100 campuses in the Bell County area, there are not enough school resource officers available to meet that criteria, which is kind of why we're here tonight to talk about the good cause exception and talk about an alternate standard. So tonight, we are looking at, if you can't meet those 3 requirements to fulfill the obligation of an armed staff at each campus, then you can look for or propose and accept a good cause exception due to lack of funding or lack of personnel who qualify to serve as the armed officer. And as previously stated, we are going to seek the good cause exception by not being able to staff all of our campuses with the law enforcement previously discussed, meaning in our case, school resource officers. And so we will ask you in a few minutes to approve a good cause exemption to the House Bill 3 standard. The alternate standard, and here's what the legislation specifically says, it may include a provision where a person can act as a security officer who is either a school district employee or a person with whom the school district contracts. So the alternate standard that we will propose tonight is that Belton ISD would enter into a contract with a firm that would provide enough armed security officers to not only service all of our campuses, but also make sure that we're in compliance with House Bill 3 requirements. To be clear, and by legislative standards, these staff or these contracted employees would carry a handgun on school premises in accordance with written regulations, and they would have all of the trainings required by House Bill 3 prior to fulfilling that role. Our alternate standard would include, if we adopt the good cause exception, and if we do approve the alternate standard of the RFP, in addition to our 9 current school resource officers, we would ask to add 19 contracted armed security officers. That would allow us the flexibility to not only have armed staff at each campus, but also allow a little bit of flexibility for our SROs to go and fulfill duties that SROs need to fulfill. So we do have SROs that office at home campuses, but they also meet needs of staff on other campuses as well. So if we had a middle school SRO that needed to go to an elementary school for support, we would want to still have an armed security officer at that campus to fulfill the legislative requirement and still have an armed staff there when the SRO would need to go fulfill those duties. We did issue an RFP in early August. We had a great response. We had 11 firms submit proposals in that RFP. We went through a rigorous evaluation system of those proposals. We had a second round where we conducted interviews with those that ranked highest through our RFP evaluations, and we do have a firm that we'd like to recommend tonight that we enter into a contract with. The firm that, after interviews were complete and references were checked, we feel that Vets Securing America would be an outstanding choice to provide our armed security officers for the 23-24 school year. At this time, we feel like we will be entering what is likely will be a 165-day contract to fulfill this need until May 22nd, 2024, and we would have payment not to exceed $850,964. And at this time, I would be open for any discussion that we need to have.
Are there any questions or comments for Mike on his presentation for the trustees?
Mike, why do you feel that this was a superior group to others?
Several things. They've been providing this type of services for not only districts in Texas, but districts nationwide. This company has vast experience in not just providing school security, but also security in a lot of different other arenas as well, colleges, businesses, for the government. It is started on a premise, it's Vets Securing America. It's a vet-started business. They target veterans, and they target law enforcement, people with law enforcement experience first and foremost, to try to fill their officers' roles. They were highly centered on trying to find the right fit for each campus and someone that will come in and not just provide security services, but be an asset to the campus and build relationships with the staff there. Also, they have a strong record. They have over 6,000 employees nationwide, so we know that they have experience filling these types of roles. One of the references we talked to, they were providing somewhere around 55 or 60, and they had operations up and running within about 3 weeks at that school district. So we felt like that they have a solid base. They've done this type of work nationwide, and the references we talked to, they've been able to get operations up and running very quickly under conditions like we're under right now.
Mike, real quick, and not an exact amount, but what are we currently paying for our SROs that we have, the 9? Do you remember?
It's, for the 9 SROs, it's within 10% of what this contract will be for 19. So
Okay.
it's somewhere around, I believe, $750,000 to $800,000 for the year.
Right. So, I mean, just to be clear, because I think everybody on the board agrees, we want the armed security guards, but from the last map that I saw, so we're gonna be into this roughly $1.5 million to do all of this, correct?
Correct.
If I'm not mistaken, we're at about 140,000 is what the state's funding? $10 per
A little
student?
more than that
A
right
little
now.
more than that, with the $15,000 per campus.
Yeah.
We're estimates, some of them are calculated on ADA, which we won't know yet. And
Right.
some of it's on, there's some additional funding for students that have weighted average daily attendance. We think it will be somewhere between probably $440,000 to $460,000, most likely,
The total funding from the state?
for the TEA safety allotments.
Right.
In lieu of any additional funding that could come from a special session or additional grant funds.
Right,
But our
just as
safety
it
allotment
stands
will be
now,
about $440,000.
we're the ones that have to find in the
Yes.
budget to make it up. I mean, well, we need it, there's no doubt, it's just been nice for the state to actually fund it.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the differences in job duties?
Yes,
right,
that's a great
between
question.
SROs
So-
and these armed guards?
As a school resource officer, these are licensed Texas police staff. They can aid in investigations, they can help do, welfare checks, home visits, all the types of things that law enforcement would do to support a school community. We, and we will work out every minute detail with the company once we get an implementation plan in place, but we envision this to be more, it's a visual security officer on campus. They will assist us with door checks. They will be walking the perimeter of the campus. They will be checking hallways. They'll be checking areas. They will take some of that, some of the observational type duties off of other staff who might be doing that. So we envision a member that's on campus for 8 hours a day, and their primary responsibility is checking perimeter, checking visitors, making sure that adults in the school have proper ID, things like that, and will basically be serving that function for us. In the event of an emergency, they would likely be the first person that might trigger the response. They will be, in addition to all the House Bill 3 requirements, they will be trained in all of our local emergency management procedures and center response protocol to make sure they can operate under those. They will not be providing roles that campus administrators would be doing as far as investigations, working with students, conflict resolution, things of that nature, and they would not be providing any of the services that an SRO could through law enforcement functions.
So other than basically space supervision, there's really no student responsibility, anything like that?
We don't envision them in aiding in investigations and things like that. They would just be an armed guard at the school to assist in any emergency situations, but also, as Mike said, to help us with some of those security items.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt that, like, as a parent, my preferred approach would be SROs, right? Without a doubt, right? I mean, the partnership that we have with Belton Police Department and Temple Police Department and the officers that we have are outstanding, right? And the way that they incorporate it into the schools, and so that would absolutely be the preferred approach. But I think given what Jeff was talking about from a funding standpoint and all the other circumstances, unfortunately, this is the next best option, right?
And I do want to point this out, I applaud Mike and Doug Taylor and Cassandra Spearman, they've been figuring this out. And obviously, when something is signed into law after legislative session and we turn around before September 1st, such a short window, we've been examining other options as well. And the thing that I appreciate about this is we believe this is a good option for us right now. As Mike said, we were thankful for high-quality submissions for us to choose from. That doesn't mean that this is the right option for us long-term in Belton ISD, and I think this gives us an opportunity this year to see how this works, to ensure that we evaluate it well, and to continue to explore other options that are gonna take additional time. And, just being real frank, asking a police department in the beginning of July if they could add X amount of new officers is unrealistic, and I think that's why you see districts across the state doing exactly what we're doing right now.
So even if we had the funding, we couldn't do it anyway.
Right.
We would not be able to get an additional, just the minimum would be probably 12 more officers, we wouldn't be able to get that done on short notice. That wouldn't be fair to ask, and they wouldn't have the capabilities to prop that up.
Right, they're not available.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So, I'm going to follow up on Joe's question about the funding. You said we were in it to 1.5 million, does that include the 844,000 that's gonna cost, plus what we're paying now?
And that's just a rough, when I was doing the math, and then I think we were at, what, $9.72 per student last year, I believe was something like that in the safety allotment, and they gave us $10 this
Yeah.
year, and then said, by the way, you've got to arm every campus out there.
And address additional safety standards as well.
Yeah, all the stuff that we've been doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so there is a definite need for us to continue to pursue additional funding from the state.
Yep.
These proposals are not fully funded by the state, in my opinion.
No, it's a good, I mean, I think sadly, everybody probably agrees that we want, as parents and school board members, armed people. I think it's a great idea. I just think it would've been nice if the state, when they agreed, said, oh, by the way, here's how you're gonna pay for that.
Does the funding for these positions include benefits for these new folks?
Just the benefits that their company provides.
So they would not be a Belton ISD employee, they'd be a contracted service for us, so their benefits would come through their company.
Who does the, if there's a guard at whatever campus, who do they answer to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that this particular firm, and there were a couple of others that offered the same thing, they will have at their own expense a command officer that will be kind of the supervisor for the 19 force that we have. They will work in close coordination with Doug Taylor, and who's in our security staff, in coordination of scheduling, making sure all posts are filled, those things of that nature. And we've talked with them, and one of the questions we talked for in the submission, and we talked through the interview process, is what do we do when a problem comes up? Who do we call? How does that get resolved? What's your response, depending on what the issue may be? So there's definitely will be a chain of command like there is with everything else. I feel like we will be better equipped than some to handle this type of contract, just because we have our own unarmed security that's already on staff. So we at our secondary campuses, we've employed security guards for years, so we kind of have some experience in managing and working through issues of security staff. And so we feel like with Doug Taylor, Cassandra Spearman, myself, our team, and with them having a clear set of hierarchy on who we contact if there's an issue, if a principal has an issue, they'll know exactly who to call and tell what the issue is, so we can try to get a quick resolution.
How much time is gonna be spent getting these folks familiar with our emergency response plan?
As much as needed, it would be the best answer to that. But there will be, in addition to the training they will come in with, and we'll have an onboarding and orientation for each one. Especially, one of the good things is if they've been in Texas and if they've been associated with schools in any capacity, they may be familiar with standard response protocol because everyone uses it now. But we would not turn anyone loose on campus until they know what that terminology means and then how to enact an emergency if they see it. One of the biggest things they're going to be doing is looking out for safety issues on
Right.
campuses. So we would suspect they would be one of the first people to make a notification if an emergency comes up.
Is this the first time we've employed armed security guards? No, we have
It
security
is.
guards.
It
This
is.
the first
Not
time?
all of our security guards that are BISD employees are all unarmed.
Right, right. So
Yes.
this is the first time we've employed armed security guards.
Yes, sir.
So how will they be set apart on campuses? Are they in uniform?
They'll be
Are
in
they
uniform.
Okay.
They will be in uniform.
So, Mike, provided this is approved, can you talk a little bit more about what the timeline looks like as far as actually having them on the campus?
So one of the things about the firm that we chose is that we will begin an immediate implementation of the plan. So that will mean stakeholder discussions with us and our groups and what exactly are we looking for, clearly defined roles on campuses. Simultaneously, they will be aggressively trying to fill positions to kind of meet their criteria they're looking for. Like we said, they love to pursue, ex-military and ex-law enforcement to fill the roles. We will not wait until all 19 positions are filled to implement. We'll begin to implement as quickly as we can, have them trained and have them ready to go, and we will fill what we consider the most critical needs first, which would be campuses where we don't have a full-time or a permanent SRO, and then we'll work from there. So it will probably be staggered. They feel like with an aggressive approach and quick turnaround on implementation meetings and things like that, that we're hoping within 2.5 to 3 weeks that we would have most of the positions filled.
Mike, are these folks gonna be made privy to all the information that comes out of our monthly meetings with the Security Council? I know we have SROs come to that. Is that something they're gonna be made a part of, or?
I think they would be information to that. We also have campus monthly safety meetings, so the administrator on each campus is typically an assistant principal. Our security team and emergency management team goes to them once a month, and we sit down and have a campus-specific security meeting. And I fully envision that they would be involved in those. I could also envision their command officer being on our district security team so that he's privy to all that information and can pass that on to the security staff. So we're gonna want them on campuses during the day, whenever we have that, but their command officer, and then absolutely having them involved in their campus security teams would be essential. Another thing that we envision would be some of our emergency management discussions and trainings is have them active participants, not only with our SROs, but also with Temple PD and Belton PD. But since they would be one element of an initial response in an emergency situation, the more discussions that they can have with local law enforcement and kind of our local law enforcement's philosophies would only benefit them in making sure they make good decisions. Ultimately, our campus administrators and our safety team are gonna be the ones making decisions on how we handle emergency situations. They're gonna be there to support.
From a funding standpoint, does this fit into the budget that we passed last meeting, or is this something that's gonna be an additional ask out of fund balance?
Is Melissa back there?
No.
Is not. My answer to that is that we didn't have final cost proposals until Tuesday when we finalized all of this. And there'll be additional funds that we need to seek in our budget that we have already passed. It'll be an additional ask. Now, I do think that we have the ability to find that money in there. But as Jeff pointed out, I want to be really clear, I don't think this is a fully funded mandate.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I asked the question, right? Because if we take it out of the budget that we just passed last week, or 2 weeks ago, right? So that's taking away from other programs and
Absolutely.
priorities and things that we already had planned, right? And if we take it out of the fund balance, right, we're taking it from the future, right? So it's definitely not fully funded.
Correct.
Well, they just gave us a trickle of what the
Right.
funds, yeah. Another mandate was not enough money from the state.
And I think that, personally, I think the interesting part of this is that they give you an opportunity to claim a good cause exception for
Right.
either funds and or personnel. I think ours lands on personnel because we will always prioritize student safety with our funds. And I want to be clear about that. I still don't think they fully funded us for this.
Is the term an annual thing? I mean, what does it run? It runs like, assuming this passes, if it does pass, what's the term? Does it
Yeah, we would have
annually?
enter in a one-year contract, and what's typical, we would have, both parties would have an option to renew. But as Matt stated, we will constantly be in discussion with other districts, with our safety partners, and seeing are there other options out there. But yeah, this would be a one-year agreement with an option to renew if that's the direction we choose to go for next school year.
Anyone else? Comments, questions for Mike? No? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution to claim a good cause exception regarding Texas House Bill 3 as presented? Mr. Norwood, got a second? Second. Mr. Preston? Is there a need for any additional discussion? No? All in favor? Raise your hand. That passes 7-0. All right, let's move on to item 2. Consider, discuss, take appropriate action regarding RFP number 2308-275-316 for Armed Security Guard Services. Do we have a motion to approve RFP number 2308-275-316 for Armed Security Guard Services as presented? Ms. Lee? Ms. Bass? Seconds? All in favor? Raise your hands. That passes 7-0.
I want to, again, publicly thank Mike and Doug, Pete Ramirez, Cassandra. They did a really good job in trying to figure out what's best find the right time and the right situation for our school district, and they did a good job doing that right now, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That concludes this evening's action items. The time is now 5:25 PM. The board will now go into closed session for A, consultation with Attorney Texas Government Code Section 551.071.
There you go.
The time is 6:13 PM, and the board will now reconvene in open session. The next item on the agenda is board training regarding evaluating and improving student outcomes, CISO. Dr. Smith?
Trustees, thank you for joining me tonight. I would like you to view me as TEA consultant Matt Smith. I am a trainer for TEA on this topic. This is a board-required training that you all have an obligation to meet every 2 years. Rucker has an obligation to meet it in his first 120 days in office. Rucker's 120 days is up on September 12th. You all would have to go through the training before January 24th, I believe was the date. And so we thought we would get her done now. It is a little bit wonky, and I will be very blunt with you on that. This is the old accountability manual. As you know, TEA has not released a new accountability manual, and they intend to finalize that accountability manual in September, and then release new scores in September. They haven't even finalized the new accountability manual yet. So a bunch of this refers to the accountability system as it currently stands. I did not provide you a whole list of data from last year because I don't want to confuse everybody, so we're going to use the sample data straight from TEA, and this is the TEA training. I have a TEA script to read tonight, and so we're going to move through that script at a blazing pace, and please ask questions along the way. Gabby and Melinda are here, not as our experts in the training, but as key members of this team who know implications of some of these things on Belton ISD, and so they'll be here to help guide us through things as well, and there will be a few times where they probably interject on some stuff as well. This is the same script and the same training that we had in this room 2 years ago, so here we go. Welcome. Thank you for choosing to be here tonight. You all have many commitments, but you chose to be here, and for that I thank you. May I have the clicker? Oh, my God. At this time, if you would, silence your cell phones, because we know that's important. Number one thing that we want to go over tonight is student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. My script says pause, take a breath, and repeat more slowly. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Which adults have to change first? That is a question for you all. Which adults have to change first?
All of us?
All of us. But what one of us might come first?
All right, since we're in a board training, I'm gonna say board.
Any other thoughts?
I agree.
I don't know what I said last year. Our behavior, my behavior as an adult, as leaders of our school system, our behaviors matter. In order to impact adult behavior change, there are 3 critical components which must be in place. First is knowledge. While very small in the continuum of adult behavior process, it is the foundation. For example, it is important for teachers to have the content skills for the subject area they teach. Second is skills. To improve upon my knowledge and improve my impact as a teacher, I will need additional skills provided in the form of staff development or mentoring. Finally, to make the transition into my adult behavior, my mindset must change. Mindset plays the largest role in changing adult behaviors. For example, let's pretend I'm a 3rd grade math teacher. In order to teach Johnny fractions, I must have a basic knowledge of fractions. To improve in the delivery of instruction and help Johnny learn about fractions, I need some skills, instructional strategies. Finally, if I do not have the mindset that Johnny will ever learn fractions, guess what? Johnny will never learn fractions. Yes, leadership matters. As leaders, we must understand that I am the one, we are the ones that will create the change, the environment that is needed for our students to be successful. Our mindset as leaders will give our students access to our goals. If we want our students to grow, we must grow, and if we want to grow, we need a growth mindset. Who does this mindset start with? Wait for responses.
Me.
Us.
Us. Me, absolutely. The research tells us adult behaviors matter. Some adult behaviors have larger effect on improving student outcomes than other adult behaviors. We've had the research on this regarding teachers. Which adult behaviors of teachers have a larger effect on improvements in student outcomes than other adult behaviors for 25 to 30 years. We have had access to this research regarding principal and superintendent behaviors for 15 to 20 years. It's only in the last 5 to 10 years that we've had a strong collection of research into which school board and school board member behaviors most correlate with improvements in student outcomes. This is relatively new research, and even though we're removed from the classroom, there are board behaviors which allow school board members to positively influence student outcomes. These behaviors start with working collaboratively with the superintendent, creating unity. I want to point out I did not put that line in there just for my own purposes. It also includes the proper systems and process and advocacy and engagement, and they will all support, these are all highly correlated school board behaviors to improve student outcomes. With a partner, take 30 seconds and discuss what you see with this chart. Want to make sure that didn't go out.
We're all part of the system.
Okay, what did you notice?
Well, we talked about the synergy between the superintendent and the board and how that has to be aligned for the rest of the system to make sense.
Excellent. This is an advanced group. What else? No, it didn't say that in there. That's just
The work that we do has a true direct impact on student outcomes.
excellent. Anything else?
We didn't talk about this, but interestingly,
We
everything on the
thought-
left-hand side, we've been working on
Yes.
pretty significantly
Yeah,
over the last
Looks very
couple of years.
familiar.
Yeah. And while our language might be a little bit different in some of the things you hear tonight and see tonight, I'm really proud of the work this group has been doing on vision, goals, values and beliefs, and making sure that we're doing the work we need to do to help our campus and our teachers and our principals do the work they need to do. Okay, I'll get back on script. I want to draw a connection here to the State Board of Education's Board Development Framework, which has 5 pillars: vision and goals, progress and accountability, systems and processes, advocacy and engagement, and synergy and teamwork. All are represented in the research. Most importantly, without boards and superintendents working collaboratively to begin the process, you never get to improve student outcomes from what is accomplished in the boardroom. But by creating unity, the activities of goal setting, identifying community values, and monitoring student progress in the boardroom can positively impact student outcomes. Remember, what happens in the boardroom impacts the classroom. We all want the effect to be a positive one. The next part, this was a wonderful discussion the last time we got together. Inputs, outputs, and outcomes. If I am playing a ball game, let's say a baseball game, what outcome do I want? To win. Yes, that is the outcome that I want. I want to win. I have never heard a coach say, go out there and lose this game and lose big. Outcomes are usually knowable at the end. Why is running the right play or having the right game plan not the outcome I want? Why is running the right play or having the right game plan not the outcome I want?
That's an input?
That's an output.
There you go. So those are things that we do or things that we measure along the way, but it isn't the outcome at the end. Those are strategies to achieve the outcome. They're inputs. They help me get to the outcome. The outcome I want is to win. Inputs are the strategies and resources, usually knowable at the beginning of the process. For example, if it's a baseball game, you got bats, you got baseballs, you got gloves, you got the resources, the things that you need to complete the game at the beginning. Who is in control of the inputs?
The coach, the teacher.
The coach, the teacher, in this case, sometimes the superintendent. We're the ones who secure the resources and develop the strategy to achieve what needs to be done. The coach is like the superintendent of the school in control of the inputs. They decide who plays when and what plays are run. What helps the coach decide who plays and what plays are run? Knowledge.
Their team, the team of coaches, their coworkers.
Excellent.
Vision, goals.
Vision and goals. Also outputs along the way. So progress monitoring and being able to say, if I'm a football coach at the end of the first quarter, here's the score that I have. It is not leading me to the outcome that I want. I need to make in-game adjustments to address the outcome at the end. So that there's key things that we need to be able to actually measure along the way to see if we're making progress toward our outcomes that we want. The score after each quarter, the amount of points being scored by players, etc., all help the coach determine what to do. These bits of information are knowable in the middle of the cycle, in this case, the ball game, and they're known as outputs. Outputs are predictive of the outcome. The quarter scores, though they are not the outcome, they are predictive of the final score and influenceable by the coach. For example, the score at halftime helps determine how you play the rest of the game. If you're 20 points ahead as a coach, we use a different strategy compared to 20 points behind. If I was a coach, I would want to know who my lead scorers are and who had most foul balls. Both outputs would help me define my strategy for the remainder of the game in order to achieve the outcome to win. What are examples of inputs in a school system?
Funding.
Funding.
Curriculum.
Curriculum. Teachers. Technology, facilities, yes, those are all resources and activities invested in a particular program or strategy that are usually knowable at the beginning of a cycle. What are examples of outputs in a school system?
Graduation is a great outfit.
Say that again.
Graduation.
Graduation. Benchmark test scores, monitoring data, audits, etc., things that give you information along the way on your way to achieve a goal. Those are considered outputs, and those are the result of a particular set of inputs. So if we do this thing, this strategy, we should have an output that allows us to get to the goal that we're trying to get at the end. Who owns the inputs and the outputs in a school system?
Superintendent?
Yes, the superintendent owns the inputs and the outputs in a school system in collaboration with the school board. What are examples of outcomes in a school system?
Students graduate, ready to go to college, military, or careers.
Absolutely. Graduation rates, test scores, CCMR rates, actual access to things after graduation. Who owns the outcomes in a school system?
Community.
Board?
Yes, the school board owns the outcomes in collaboration with the superintendent.
All these little hands.
So, in a school system, we have inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Let's add another layer just for fun, distinguishing between other outcomes and a student outcome. What might be an example of an outcome in a school system that is not a student outcome?
Staff retention.
Staff retention, great. Yes, an outcome can be. I'm sorry, y'all, I apologize. Yes, an outcome can be just about anything that a school system creates, but a student outcome is a measure of what the students know and are able to do. So we could have an outcome that we complete specific training as a school system done by a specific date, and we can measure it. We did one last year, we had an outcome of every employee setting professional learning goals. Those are all outcomes that you have in a school system. They are not necessarily student outcomes, though, because they're not a measure of what a student knows and is able to do. Why is it important to distinguish between other outcomes and student outcomes?
We're in the business of educating students.
Yes, sir. School systems exist not to have a balanced budget, not to design the most innovative buildings, or to be the positive talk at the local restaurant. While those are all important, they are not the reason a school system exists. School systems exist to improve student outcomes. Who has the first question about inputs, outputs, outcomes, or student outcomes before we move on? I guess there are no questions, so we shall proceed. Now we dive into our wonderful talk about the accountability system. Texans want an accountability system for our public schools. It may not be A through F, that is my commentary, but I do believe wholeheartedly that accountability for progress in our schools is something we need to be focused on. Our communities deserve that. Why do you think that should matter to all of us? Why do you think accountability systems should matter to all of us in this room?
Because we're stewards of the taxpayers' money.
That's right. Anything else?
If you have the right accountability system in place, it can help you course correct,
That's right.
but you have to have the right accountability system in place.
In essence, what we know is what gets measured gets done. Just like the board sets student outcome goals, school level Texans have expectations for our schools at the state level. Feedback loops inform progress and help us get better faster. In addition, parents and taxpayers deserve to know how their children and their children's schools are doing. There is ample evidence that assessing student performance is beneficial for students, in part because students who are challenged perform better than students who are not. And finally, our accountability system challenges leaders to set goals and make specific decisions. That helps school systems focus on those goals for our students. There are 3 key things folks need to know to understand our accountability system: TEKS, STAR, and A through F. Let's start with TEKS. What does TEKS stand for? What are the TEKS?
Essential knowledge and skills.
Absolutely. TEKS stands for the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. The TEKS describe the minimum that every child, K through 12 in Texas, deserves to know and be able to do so that they can be prepared for success in college, a career, or the military. Why do Texans want clear expectations that describe what children deserve to know and be able to do? Why have TEKS at all?
I think that's the most important piece of this entire thing is the TEKS, because there's been a lot of research into what a first grader should know by the end of the year, and a second grader, and so on, and it guides instruction. It's one of the most valuable instruments we have as public school teachers and all kinds of things, because we have, it's a great document.
But it sets a consistent expectation across the state.
Anything else? Excuse me, lost my spot. Yes, having clear learning expectations helps ensure that students are prepared to be successful in college, career, or the military. People without vision perish. Clear expectations provide a vision for what students ought to learn. Accountability matters. Using TEKS to evaluate and improve student outcomes. Let's take a look at a real example. Here's one of the TEKS for 3rd grade math about algebraic reasoning. The student applies mathematical process standards to analyze and create patterns and relationships. The student is expected to 3.5a represent 1- and 2-step problems involving addition and subtraction of whole numbers to 1,000 using pictorial models, number lines, and equations. Why might families want their children to know and be able to do this?
So they know how to do math.
Math that is
In the real world.
directly applicable to the real world.
Yes. And math is, all math is built on the last thing you learn, so you can't move forward in math till you learn the last thing.
This is foundational to the things that come next.
While seemingly simple, this represents an important building block for students. This is a critical step to being ready for the type of math they will experience in careers, college, or in the military. So that brings us to the critical question, how can Texans know whether or not students have gained mastery of the types of knowledge and skills shown here?
You could give them a test to find out.
We could, yes. We would have a way of verifying that those skills have been acquired. In Texas, the tool we use to verify TEKS mastery is the State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness, or STAR. The STAR measures the extent to which students have learned and are able to apply the knowledge and skills defined in the TEKS. Every STAR question is directly aligned to the TEKS for the grade, subject, or course being assessed. So, how exactly does STAR accomplish this? Let's look back at an example to find out. This example makes it easy to see how STAR questions are directly aligned to the TEKS. It also highlights that some tools are good for some things, but not for others. For example, what's a yardstick good for helping you figure out? A measurement? How long something is? Yes. I find this example really interesting, but I'm going to read it anyways. Yes, if I want to know how tall I am or how tall someone else is, a yardstick is the perfect tool.
Is it?
That's what I was going to
Who
say.
holds a yardstick in this room? Do you
Yeah.
hold a yardstick? Anybody?
Not more.
Broke
No.
it against my kid.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Pencil it.
Here's where they might be a little more accurate in that example. What's the problem with trying to use a yardstick to figure out how much I weigh? That's right, it just doesn't make much sense, because that's not what a yardstick was made for. In the same way, STAR is great for some things and not so great for others. What are examples of things STAR might be the correct yardstick for?
Fabric. That's
Sorry.
That's what they use it for.
Wait, what?
I'm not sure
What
if you
might
heard
be,
the
I
question.
gotta change my example. You're throwing me off my script. What might be examples of what STAR is good for measuring?
Yeah, the TEKS.
Mastery of the TEKS. For example, the STAR math test is designed to describe how much math students know and are able to do at any grade level expectation.
Given day.
What is STAR not designed for?
Formative assessment practice.
Excellent. STAR is not designed for formative assessment. This is not something a teacher should be using on a daily basis, and nor can use on a daily basis to make decisions for students. To fully understand information the STAR provides you, first need to fully understand the system. STAR student performance has 4 levels. Each describes how students performed relative to the TEKS they were being evaluated on. Master's grade level means the students were expected to succeed in the next grade or course with little or no academic intervention. Students performing at the master's grade level statistically have a 75% chance of post-secondary success without remediation. I want to remind you all that this is all based on previous STAR tests and previous accountability system. This is particularly important because there are as many students across the state who are graduating from high school but who arrive at college unprepared and must take remedial courses before they can begin their normal coursework. For some students, this could even mean that their financial aid runs out before they have enough credits to graduate, because some of the aid was used on remedial courses for which they didn't get credit toward graduating. Meets grade level means that students have a high likelihood of success in the next grade or course, but still may need some short-term targeted academic interventions. Students performing at the meets level have a 60% chance of post-secondary success without remediation. These students are not fully where we want all students to be, but they are close enough that they are very likely to be successful. The majority of these students will be successful wherever they go after high school. Very interesting statement right there. Approaches grade level means that students are likely to succeed in the next grade or course with targeted academic intervention. These students are not yet where we want them to be, and they are going to need a fair amount of support to get there. Lastly, there did not meet grade level, which means students are unlikely to succeed in the next grade or course without significant ongoing academic intervention. These students are not at all where we want them to be, and it will take considerable effort on the part of adults in their lives to get them back on track. Another way to look at this is think about how STAR is vertically aligned from third grade to post-secondary readiness. As you can recall, master's grade level on STAR indicates 75% chance of post-secondary success without remediation, which is the same percentage chance as the ACT, SAT college readiness thresholds. The vertical alignment between the TEKS and the STAR from third grade to post-secondary readiness helps ensure a pathway for all students to be college, career, or military ready upon graduation. The TEKS and STAR are key puzzle pieces used in the A through F accountability framework. Are there any questions on that? The big question most folks have, how do we calculate an A versus a B versus a C and so forth? Under the state accountability system, there are 3 domains: student achievement, school progress, and closing the gaps. To understand how all these pieces fit together, there are a few key beliefs worth focusing on. The first involves understanding the distinction between pass-fail accountability systems and multi-tiered accountability systems. In a pass-fail accountability system, all campuses and school systems that are not at the lowest levels of performance are labeled as passing, and those at the lowest levels are labeled as failing. In Texas, those labels are met standard and improvement required. Who here knows what the threshold that improvement required was set at? IR was initially calculated by looking at the 5th percentile, but then the cut score was fixed. What that means is that as a practical matter, the threshold for IR is so low that the majority of students on the campus can be illiterate or enumerate on grade level, but still be considered met standard. There is a great deal of talk about having high expectation for students, but few people would argue that a predominantly illiterate or enumerate on grade level student body is meeting high expectations. This is a key weakness of pass-fail systems. If not done carefully, they can perpetuate and even glorify incredibly low expectations that none of us would accept for our own children. What questions do you have, or what have you noticed about pass-fail accountability systems versus a multi-tiered accountability system? Excellent. In addition to being multi-tiered, there are 2 more key beliefs that are important to understand the design of the state accountability system: possibility and stability. In the ideal accountability system, it must be mathematically possible that all districts and campuses receive an A rating. The opposite of this is a forced distribution system, wherein there must always be a set percentage of A campuses and F campuses and everything in between. That means that someone always has to be F rated no matter how high their campus performance is. That's not how A through F in Texas works. The system has been intentionally designed to ensure that every single campus and every single district, if they hit the mark, can earn an A rating. That doesn't mean that the expectations are allowed to be low to make it look like everyone has earned an A, but it does mean that everyone who earns an A gets an A, unless they change the system mid-year. The final key belief is stability. Simply put, education leaders want an accountability system where the goalpost isn't constantly moving backwards. So the accountability system has been designed to where the bar will remain static for 5 years. 5 years where the rules don't change. What questions do you have, or what are you noticing about these 2 key beliefs, possibility and stability, that are directly related to the A through F system in Texas?
They have changed.
In theory, it's great,
They're
it
not
actually
stable.
doesn't change.
In theory, it's great, not necessarily stable. 5 years with COVID for a couple in between is an interesting time frame. I still, with my superintendent hat on right now, argue the fact I don't know that it is possible that every district school can earn an A, and we know that based on research about how standardized testing goes. And so when you're too heavily weighted for an accountability system on a standardized test, I don't necessarily agree that every school and every district can get it. That's my personal opinion. Having discussed those 3 key beliefs relating to how to best design an accountability system, multi-tiered, everybody has a possibility of an A, and stability over time, we can now dive into the Texas accountability system. I need to turn our air down. It has gone up to 78 degrees in here. I will let you all talk with a partner sitting next to you about what your beliefs are about the Texas A through F accountability system.
Hey man, you want to know what this is?
No doubt.
Because it's
You need to know.
mindset.
I gotta laugh.
Then you can't
You know,
test.
I believe in accountability. I just think accountability can.
One or 2 day test, they can 3 have 5 because they don't test.
Don't believe in it. Much more complex than that. I just don't think that you say, I think it's important, public taxpayer dollars are going to this, and I think we should be public accountants for it.
In the original system they have.
But once it's in the minutes, it's like, you can't for some of it, but I think,
People have different.
would anyone like to share?
Trying to drive it down into one, just drive it down into F.
Excellent. We're gonna dive into the 3 key components of the Texas accountability system, the A through F accountability system, first, by starting with student achievement. The student achievement domain focuses on STAR data, graduation rates, how students performed on college, career, and military readiness measures. For elementary and middle school campuses, STAR results would be 100% of the student achievement domain. I will read that again for emphasis. For elementary and middle school campuses, STAR results would be 100% of the student achievement domain. For high school and district scores, 40% would be STAR, 40% would be college, career, military readiness indicators, and 20% would be graduation rates for most school systems. So that is under the first part, the student achievement domain.
Can I ask a question?
If I can answer it, I'll do my best.
Just real quick, on the college career readiness, how is that determined?
So we're gonna dive into that in just a minute with a bunch of detail.
I'm not trying to make this longer.
No, you're,
And then everything you're about to learn, you're gonna have to forget, because it's not the way it's going to be.
well, they're good, well. To calculate, Rucker, we're gonna answer that question in just a few minutes. To calculate the district score and A through F grade for Domain 1, the STAR component worth 40% of the total Domain 1 score is calculated by averaging the percentage of students who score approaches and above, meets and above, and masters. So you notice by this diagram, it shows you how that is calculated. Notice the Domain 1 score is an A, but the mathematical calculation is a 60. 60 represents the raw score. DEA takes the raw score and converts it to the scale score to determine the letter grade assigned. Graduation rates, accounting for 20% of the overall Domain 1 score, is calculated by taking the highest percentage of the 4-year, 5-year, or 6-year graduation rate. The college, career, military readiness component, accounting for the final 40% of the Domain 1 score, includes a range of indicators. Each student need only achieve any one item from the list for the campus and district to get credit. Let's take a closer look of what indicators give a student credit for college, career, or military readiness. So on the college CCMR, college, career, military readiness, to be considered college ready, students need to meet one of the following criteria. Meet TSI. TSI stands for Texas Success Initiative. Meet TSI criteria in reading and math. And they can do that through a variety of ways. There's SAT scores, ACT scores, TSIA, which is the Texas Success Initiative Assessment, or a college prep course, completing a college prep course in high school. They can do it by meeting a criteria of 3 on an AP or a 4 on an IB exam. In Belton ISD, we do not have an IB program at this time, so we have AP programs, and so they can meet it that way. They can complete dual credit courses, 9 or more hours in any subject, or 3 hours or more in ELA or math. They can earn an associate's degree, and they can completely qualify for college credit in any subject on-ramps course. So through any of those ways, a student can become CCMR eligible or ready according to those state outcomes.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
All right, so for on-ramps specifically, so it says complete and qualify for college credit in any subject on-ramps course. So does that mean they have to exercise the option to take the credit?
It does. I think they have to qualify, in order to qualify for college credit, they have to exercise that option.
Okay, I got a follow-up question for outside of here.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
CCMRs, oh, I got off of my script, hold on. Oh, there we go. Okay, in each of the three areas that we will explore, college ready, career ready, and military ready, legislation has been passed that gives schools an opportunity to receive an outcomes bonus, extra funding for students that are CCMR above the established state threshold. For each economically disadvantaged graduate that meets the outcome bonus criteria above the state percentage threshold, the district will receive $5,000. For each non-economically disadvantaged student that meets the outcome bonus criteria above the state percentage threshold, the district will receive $3,000. And for each special education graduate that meets the outcome bonus criteria above the state percentage threshold, the district will receive $6,000. For now, the state thresholds are set at 11% for economically disadvantaged students, 24% for non-economically disadvantaged students, and 0% for special education students. For example, if you have 25 economically disadvantaged graduates and 10 of them meet the requirements of the outcome bonuses, the threshold of 11% is now applied to the total number of 25 graduates. 2.75 is equal to 3 students, and subtracted from the 10 students that meet the criteria of the threshold, 10 minus 3, equaling 7 students. The district will receive a bonus of $5,000 for each student above the threshold. That means in this scenario, the district would receive $7,000, 7 times $5,000 for $35,000. This process is repeated for non-economically disadvantaged students and special education students. The college readiness threshold of the CCMR outcome bonus is, number 1, meet the TSI criteria in reading and math through either SAT, ACT, TSIA, and earn an associate's degree or enroll in college by fall after graduation. So that bonus is about, you either have to do both of those, you earn the associate's degree and you meet that testing threshold, or you meet that testing threshold and you enroll in college right after high school.
So the only associates program we have though is the TBI program.
Correct, the bioscience program.
And is that money, that bonus money, where is that poured back into?
It goes back into our general fund. Okay, career ready. Similarly, to be career ready in the state accountability system, students need to meet one of the following criteria. 1, earn an industry-based certification. There are currently 245 industry certifications that can be earned to satisfy the requirements of being state, nationally, or internationally recognized, and a program stackable and valuable for the industry. Number 2, earn a level 1 or level 2 certificate. According to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, I think this is the one we call THEC. Level 1 and level 2 certificates are awarded by institution of higher education, certifying the satisfactory completion of a higher education program. Upon completion of a certificate, it is valid without further action on the individual's part. They are usually awarded in workforce education areas by public and private 2-year institutions. So example, like Temple College, etc. Level 1 certificates are awarded for completing a program consisting of at least 15 and no more than 42 semester credit hours. Level 2 certificates are awarded for completing a program of at least 30, but not more than 51 semester credit hours. Certificates are different from certifications, which are not administered by an institution of higher education. Instead, certifications are administered by a certification body. What's our automotive certification? ASC. There it is. So that's by an outside body and not by Temple College, et cetera. So that's the difference between the two. The one that they're talking about here is awarded, certifications are awarded where credentials are needed to meet ongoing requirements maintained as a currency of the certification. Lastly, students can complete a coherent sequence of coursework aligned with the certification. Note, this is going away soon, and this is only worth a 0.5 point. Special education students can earn career-ready status by graduating with a completed IEP and workforce readiness or graduate under an advanced degree plan. So every student in our system has the opportunity to earn this distinction depending on either their IEP goals or meeting the requirements that we've talked about already. The career readiness threshold of the CCMR outcome bonus is meet the TSI criteria in reading and math, that's through SAT, ACT, TSI-A, and earn an industry-based certification or earn a level 1 or level 2 certificate. Next is military ready. To be considered military ready in the state accountability system, students need to enlist in one of the branches of the armed forces. Students can prepare for enlistment by meeting with a recruiter, taking the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and preparing physically and mentally. The military readiness threshold of the CCMR outcome bonus is number 1, earn a passing score on the ASVAB, and number 2, enlist in the U.S. Armed Forces after graduation.
So we get no credit for ROTC students, they have to.
They gotta pass the ASVAB and enlist in order to get credit.
There's no space.
Is all of this data organized and tracked through PINs? How's all of this?
Yes, through our data, we do data submissions to TEA, and that's all tracked through our state portal. It's TSDS is the actual name of the system, I believe this, and I can't remember what it stands for right now. Okay, we're gonna move on to the school progress portion. How about school progress, everyone? If you're going to try and describe the impact campuses are having on improving student outcomes, which statewide available data would you use to do it? There are a variety of ways you could go about it. You could look at how students are growing year over year, or you could look at how similar campuses are performing relative to each other. Again, both of those things are dependent on the STAR test. These are two strategies being employed in the school progress domain: academic growth and relative performance. The final score and grade for domain 2 is the best of either academic growth or relative performance. Now let's look at how each of the two components in domain 2 are calculated. For academic growth, the domain looks at how students performed last year compared to how they performed in this year, and it will look at whether or not they met or exceeded expected growth targets. If the growth targets are exceeded or met, 1 point is earned for the student. If performance is maintained, 0.5 points are earned for the student. If progress is limited, 0 points are earned. The score is derived from the percentage of points earned compared to the total possible points. So you get a point if they're meeting a growth target, you get a half a point if they're staying on track. If they slip, you get a 0 points. This is going to be super important for when we talk about the next accountability system. For relative performance, the domain will look at how campuses with similar numbers of economically disadvantaged students performed relative to each other, and how far above or below that norm the campus lies. Why do you think it's important to compare performance of campuses based on the percentage of economically disadvantaged students?
SES status is the #1 indicator of difficulty achieving or high achievement.
Absolutely.
It outplays every other factor.
And so, it provides us with an apples-to-apples comparison of the impact the schools are having for students who are likely to have similar needs. So in this situation, school relative performance is based on comparing your performance to schools that are like you. Similar demographic breakdown as your school. So when we talk about relative performance, you're talking about how your school is doing compared to a specific group of, it's 40, correct still, Gabby?
Yes.
40 like schools around the state. Okay?
So not necessarily another campus in our district.
Sometimes.
Could be.
Yeah, sometimes. Finally, the third domain is closing the gaps. The Closing the Gaps domain is meant to help ensure attention is given to each and every student in our schools. Grades in the other domains are based on looking at all students together. This domain looks at groups of students separately. Groups include students of the same race, income level, special education status, etc. Higher grades are awarded if all groups of students are doing well. This domain also serves to meet federal accountability requirement standards. In order to reach the final grade for Domain 3, each student groups are compared to targets in the academic achievement in math and reading. This is at the meets grade level or above on STAR, graduation rate thresholds or academic growth if the district or campus does not have graduates, CCMR or overall student achievement for all subjects if there are no graduates, and the performance and improvement of English language students on the TELPAS exam that scores students' ability under the ability to listen to, read, write, speak, and understand the English language. I want you to know I'm an English teacher. I did not write that sentence. That is the script. The number of targets met is divided by the total number of targets and then weighted. Let's discuss an example to help with this. If a district has represented in 8 groups and has graduates, there would be 32. 8 for the reading academic achievement, 8 for the math academic achievement, 8 for graduation, and 8 for CCMR. Those are 32 performance targets to meet in the first 3 categories of performance target, and a 33rd target for the English language proficiency measures by the Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System, or TELPAS. The TELPAS exam is comprised of 4 components: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The components are aligned to the English language proficiency skills, the ELPS. The ELPS are the standards for English learners and are assessed by TELPAS as the TEKS are with a star. The total targets are met and divided The total targets met are divided by the total possible targets and weighted to determine the points for the score. Does that help you all understand Domain 3?
Yes.
Are there any questions? I think a key piece, and Gabby and Melinda, feel free to jump in on this. One of the things that I think for closing the gaps that's important to remember is that there are specific targets by group of students that you have in your school district, and those calculations are made by TEA of what targets you should be hitting. Anything you want to add on that, Gabby?
The groups that are monitored for each campus, we all have the same groups, but you have more specific targets that you're looking at for each campus. The other thing that I would add to that is what Matt said, but it's really important for us to be aware of it, is 32 different areas that you have to understand the target for each of those 32 areas. And the weighting of each is different.
On this sheet here, where it has like 14 student groups, what is 12 and 13? What are those? What is considered 12 and 13?
Continuously enrolled is a student who has stayed within our district continuously. They have not been gap.
Okay.
Non-continuously enrolled would be a student who was with us, they left, and they came back.
Any other questions? Once scores are determined for each of those domains, the best score from Domain 1 or Domain 2 is used to make up 70% of the district or campus score. The remaining 30% comes from the Domain 3 score. These raw scores are scaled up to determine the final A through F grade. I would like to point out how in the final score it's made up of many factors. TEA would like to point out that in the final score is made up of many factors: STAR, TELPAS, CCMR, and graduation rates. These factors appear in several domains, and some are not used in the 3 final rating system due to the system taking the best scores within Domain 2 and between Domain 1 and 2. This brings us to the end of the section on state accountability. Before we take a break, are there any questions that you have? Why I paused on that is there language in here. It says, oh, there's many factors that have contributed to an accountability score. I think there are many, I shouldn't say many, there are factors that contribute to an accountability score at the high school level. At the elementary and middle school level, we know that STAR drives everything in accountability in the system. I do want to point out, before we take a quick break, and Becca, can I project real quick?
EF 14, screen read EF 14.
They renamed that. It used to say Bronco Room. Ooh, look at that number. That is not your code. You can try and enter your code. You can try and enter your code, but that is not your code. So I do want to point out, and this is part of the script, but I'm just showing you a practical example, is that texasschools.gov are where all of this information lives on the website. So you can go here, texasschools.gov, and you can search by.
There we go.
Trustees, we apologize for the delay. We had a full SD card, and so now that has changed. And we are moving on. Becca will start projecting again here in just a minute. We're moving on to these last important parts. Student outcome goals. We have discussed, it's slide 24 is what we're on now.
Oh, there we go.
25. There we go. Student outcome goals. We've discussed inputs, outputs, and outcomes. We've distinguished other outcomes from student outcomes. We've discussed how schools are held accountable to improve student outcomes. In continuing to create and support the vision for your school system, we will now add the next layer, student outcome goals. Why do we need goals?
Gotta know where you're headed.
Gotta know where you're headed. Anything else? Excellent. That's good. That covers it all.
They give you the answers though.
Yes, they do. And so student outcome goals are important because they should be SMART goals. What does SMART stand for?
Specific, measurable,
Achievable.
Attainable.
realistic, timely.
To accomplish those things, to move from being a student outcome to a student outcome goal, you need to add a few things to the statement. A baseline, a target, a population, and a deadline. Now that we know how goals can become specific and measurable, how many goals should you have? Hint, under preparing to focus on page 16 of your manual. The manual is the other document that you have. I don't know what it says on this. Yeah.
It was higher than it should have been, I thought.
Page 16. How about that? Huh. I don't know what to say to that. Except Franklin Covey of Stephen Covey fame studies leadership and says 3 to 5 goals. In one of their studies, they looked at the relationships between the number of goals an organization has and the number of goals an organization is likely to achieve. For organizations with 1 to 3 goals, they are likely to achieve between 1 and 4. For organizations with 5 to 7 goals, they're likely to achieve 1 to 2. And for organizations with 8 or more goals, they're likely to achieve 0. Effective leadership requires focus. You can have as many goals as you want, and that will sound great to many constituents, but it will harm your students. Leaders who want to improve student outcomes focus on a narrow set of priorities. Think about it this way. I have a truck that averages 20 miles per gallon. If I add 1 gallon of gas, my expectation is to go about 20 miles. But if I have 2 trucks and still only the 1 gallon of gas, I can expect each truck to move about 10 miles. What if I have a fleet of 20 trucks and still must equally distribute that 1 gallon? I can expect none of my trucks will even start. Texas is a large state, and there are 2 statewide initiatives that we all need to be made aware of, and this has to do with student outcomes, I promise. The first is the 60 by 30 Texas initiative, and this was launched in 2015 with a clear and bold vision to be among the highest achieving states in the country. 60 by 30 Texas is a roadmap to help Texas reach that future through higher education. Higher education provides many benefits to Texas students, their families, and the communities in which they live and work. That's why 60 by 30 Texas goal is centered on Texas students. Research shows that someone with a bachelor's degree can earn nearly double the lifetime wages of a high school graduate. And as wages go up, so does the state's revenue through tax increases. Higher education also helps the state meet its changing workforce needs and spurs new business. In other words, when Texas students win, the state wins. Goal 1 of this initiative, by 2030, at least 60% of Texans ages 25 to 34 will have a certificate or degree. Goal 2, by 2030, at least 550,000 students in that year will complete a certificate, associate, bachelor's, or master's from an institution of higher education in Texas. Goal 3, by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions of higher education will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. And Goal 4, by 2030, undergraduate student loan debt will not exceed 60% of first-year wages for graduates of Texas public institutions. Okay. The second statewide initiative supports teachers with the science of teaching reading. The science of teaching reading includes research-based, high-quality core reading instruction with explicit and systematic teaching of both word recognition and language comprehension. Everybody remembers the reading academies, right? Scarborough's Reading Rote, 2001, provides a helpful model of reading instruction that illustrates the subcomponents of single word reading and language comprehension. When woven together, these subcomponents reinforce each other and enable skilled reading. When educators understand and can apply their science of teaching reading to their instructional practices, they have the critical knowledge and skills to support skilled reading. Application of the STR, the science of teaching reading, means educators implement scientifically based reading instruction, use data to inform instructional practices, identify characteristics of struggling readers, and provide targeted instruction as necessary. There's a website on TEA that provides information on reading practices, including the reading academies, etc., and making sure that we have effective placement of teachers in pre-K through second grade and more. These two initiatives, the first one, 60 by 30 Texas, and the reading academies, or STR, these two initiatives are in response to the needs that exist to have all students reading on grade level to ultimately provide top quality workforce for the future. Greatest gift we can have is the ability to choose. Every student deserves the ability to choose, the ability to have success in the future, even when we do not know what the future will look like. As educational leaders, we have an obligation to instill the learning agility in every student that they need to be successful in an unknown future. What are some of the skills and maybe in Belton ISD competencies students need to be successful in all situations?
Perseverance.
Perseverance.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, adaptability, yes, all of those wonderful things in our journey of a graduate. Where's that? It's not a journey.
C to the third power, right? E.
Empower,
Yes.
and critical thinking, we know it all.
Communication.
You all are excellent. This is an advanced group right here. All students need the agility, the learning agility to work with other people by building workable relationships, use data, information, and results to make difficult decisions, and all of those things that we just described in our journey of a graduate. This next slide shows you a little bit about what is required. Statute requires public school boards, that is you, to adopt detailed plans developed by the management teams, that's the administration, that achieve goals in two key areas: early childhood literacy and mathematics proficiency, and college, career, and military readiness. So you have to adopt goals as a school board to do those. Do you remember what we refer to those as? House Bill 3 goals. And so this is a direct relation to House Bill 3. We have just said that we need to create 3 to 5 goals. This covers 3 of the 5. There are requirements that apply to all plans and specific requirements for both early literacy and math and CCMR plans. Let's take a look at the requirements for all plans. Each plan has a requirement to assign at least one district level administrator or employee of the Regional Education Service Center to oversee the coordination, set specific quantifiable annual goals for 5 years at each campus, be reviewed annually by the board at a public meeting, and post annual report on district and campus websites. I want to point out that every year what we've done is it was in October of last year. It will be in October again of this year. We go over how we did on our House Bill 3 goals is, over the last year, we have to wait until data comes out from GEA in order to do that. So last 2 years, you've gotten a presentation in the fall. This year, you'll get a presentation in the fall as well, when we have the finalized data for all of that. We have the data now, we just have to match it up with how we talk about it with the accountability system. But we do that every year and say, here's what our House Bill 3 goal was, here was the progress measure we were trying to hit, and we present that to you in a workshop usually. There are a few specific requirements related to the bill for early childhood as well as college, career, and military ready. Both plans must include annual aggregate student growth targets. For early childhood, the goal is focused on third grade math and reading STAR. For CCMR, the aggregate goal is focused on readiness indicators evaluated under the student achievement domain, domain 1. Both plans must include annual targets for applicable student groups and closing the gaps domain. Notice that the early childhood plan should also include targeted teacher professional development. As we mentioned earlier, goals become specific quantifiable goals by giving them a population baseline, deadline, and annual student group targets. And we'll move on. Why is it important to establish a baseline?
You know where you're starting?
You know where you're starting. You have to know where you currently are, your starting point. What about a target? Why is it important to set a target?
So you know when you get there.
So you know where you're going and you know where you want to be. Yogi Berra once said, if you do not know where you're going, how do you know when you're going to get there? Sounds like a Chris Ford quote right there. The baseline and the targets give you the quantifiable components of your goals. If these components supply the quantifiable components, what supplies the specific components of the goal? The population and deadline supply the specific components of the goal. The population tells the specific student groups that are being measured, and the deadline tells you by when you want to be there. All of those things together make it a SMART goal. Why do you think it's important to have a month in the deadline?
It makes it more specific.
It adds a deeper layer of specificity by giving more precise time, measurement of the year. I think Jeff has gone through this training. This is an optional activity and we are not going to complete it. This is where you would turn with your partner, we would fill in a data chart, and since the data is not public and we're being recorded right now, we won't fill in this current chart from this year. We'll move on to the next activity, or the next one. If you take a look at a student outcome goal example, let's look at a few examples that could meet the requirements of the 3 required specific quantifiable goals. In this example, what is the population?
Third grade students.
Excellent. What is the target or what is the baseline for all students according to this chart?
39.
39% median level.
Excellent. What's the target for 2023 for economically disadvantaged students?
32, or the target?
Target.
41, 41.
And why do some student groups not have a baseline or yearly targets?
Because they don't have enough of them to make up the group.
Here we go. That is one change that's also coming in all of this is our student group number that gives you that threshold was lowered this year in the potential accountability system. The district in this example does not have 25 or more students tested in these student groups. What is the deadline for the overall goal? Yes. On the next one, we'll take a look at the next slide. It's the blue chart. It says increase the percent of third grade students that score meets grade level or above on STAR Math from 41% to 54% by August 2025. What is the target for Asian students in 2023?
57.
Yes, 57%. Are there specific student group deadlines? It seems like a little.
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Finally, we'll move on to CCMR on the next one. The final example is the required CCMR goal for our school system. Who is the population in this goal? Yes, graduates, that is correct. Any questions on student outcome goal examples? Goal progress measures, or GPMs. In a ball game, why does the scoreboard matter?
Because that's why you play the game.
Tells you who's winning or losing.
Tells you who's winning or losing. It helps us determine our next moves, the strategy we need, etc. Just as a ball game uses a scoreboard, we need a way to measure if we're on track or not, accomplishing our yearly targets for our goals. If you recall, one of the behaviors most correlated with improving student outcomes in the boardroom is monitoring the progress of student outcome goals. We do this by creating goal progress measures. Goal progress measures are vitally important in three ways. One, behavior in the boardroom is echoed in the classroom. It's a trickle-down effect regarding the important focus of the organization. Number two, what gets measured gets done. If I'm accountable for results, I will focus on getting results. And number three, it helps us identify which adult behaviors are improving, so our student outcome goals, which are not, helps us identify which adult behaviors are improving our student outcome goals and which are not. As a superintendent, how many inputs achieving the outcomes, as a superintendent, how are my inputs achieving the outcomes defined by the board? We have to be able to see that, and that's what they're talking about in the script. That idea of inputs are our strategies, our approach to it. The outputs are the things that we're measuring along the way, annual targets, and the outcomes are the eventual outcome that you want at the end of it all. Goal progress measures are, they include a baseline, target, population, and deadline. They're predictive of the goal, and they are influenceable by the superintendent. So these are things that we take the lead in setting, similar to our key progress measures as a system. What else gets measured in a game that can be predictive of winning and accomplishing a goal? What else can be measured in a game? Let's think a baseball game.
Key
or a
progress
football
measures,
game.
KPMs?
KPMs, yes.
How much time's left?
Time, yes.
The inning scores.
Yes, the inning scores. All of those things can be measures during a game. It might be your pitch count, it might be a bunch of things like that, it can be a lot of different things. In the same way, goal progress measures can measure many things as long as they are predictive of the goal and influenceable by the superintendent. Goal progress measures like the student outcome goals have baseline targets, population and deadline. Goal progress measures are different from student outcome goals in that the superintendent owns the development and process in collaboration with the board. They're predictive of the goal, they can be updated multiple times each year, and are influenceable by the superintendent. These are the outputs. This is good news for board members. The superintendent does this work. Finally, how many goal progress measures should we have? Between 1 and 3 per student outcome goal. So to your point, remember this from last time, it kind of multiplies the way we said that. So if you have 3 goals, and each of them has 3 measures, you're up to 9 specific targets on each one. Now it's another optional activity, and I'm sure that you want to go through this.
Some of us had to go through this in detail during the COVID year.
Yes.
And online and had to take tests on all this crap. Yes, yeah, I took pictures.
All right, we're gonna go to examples of goal progress measures, and so this is where Gabby and Melinda, feel free to weigh in. I am gonna show you a couple of things in Belton ISD again in a minute. Becca, I'm gonna have you bump off, not yet though. But if you take a look, the student outcome goal is in the green in the back on this slide. And so you see it back there, increase the percent of third grade students, blah, 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 from 39 to 52 by August 2025. The goal progress measure 1, 2, and 3, they are key indicators that should lead us to get to that final outcome, to the things that you would monitor annually along the way. And you see the percent of pre-K students that score on grade level or above in literacy will increase. So by saying we're going to focus on that at the pre-K level, we believe that in a certain number of years that'll get us to the goal that's outlined in the green in the back. That makes sense to everybody?
We call those KPMs here.
Correct. Okay. Yep. Any questions on any of that? All right, let's look at another example. participants identify baseline targets, deadlines, and population. So let's take a look at goal progress measure 1.1. Who is our population in goal progress measure 1.1? GPM 1.1. K through third grade students. And what is the target for all students by June of 2024? 60%. Excellent. Board members, the point here is that you hire a superintendent as an educational expert to present to you recommendations of what to use as progress measures. You adopt what is best for your school system as long as the progress measures meet the criteria of being specific, quantifiable, having a baseline, have student group targets, a deadline, a population, are predictive of the goal. The superintendent has influence over them, and they will challenge the organization to change adult behaviors to increase student outcomes. This process is applicable to every goal. Let's look at the other two required goals. If you take a look at the next one, you can see here is a math example. I don't think I need to go through anything with you on the math example. Everybody gets how to read these. And then finally, the CCMR example. And we're going to take a look at specifically how these things relate to Belton ISD in just a minute. What if we're a K-12 campus or only have one elementary that is not Belton ISD? So we're going to skip over that slide. We have multiple elementary campuses. What does this look like on each campus? So this is an important one to take a look at. This is how the alignment of our system is important. If you look at the example they give up there in the background in blue, the goal, increase the percent of third grade students that score meets grade level or above on STAR Math from 52% to 66% by August 2025. If I have one school in our district that is already performing near that, we don't want to set a target that is just doesn't mean anything to them. So the targets should vary according to the school and what they need to accomplish, with the ultimate goal of us hitting our district level target. So our campuses can have individualized goals, but the alignment should be seen throughout our system, from campus improvement plans to district improvement plans, to help us achieve the overall goal. Okay? Any questions on that?
So our elementary campuses, they have SMART goals like in the classroom. Are they also aligned with like campus and district, these big goals?
With their House Bill 3 goals. So those are articulated in each of the campus's improvement plans. It's important to remember that the House Bill 3 goal for elementary is only based on third grade. And so, like your experience with your students, each classroom is working on setting goals with their students and setting SMART goals with their students. And yes, they are aligned to their literacy or math, but it's not necessarily connected directly to the third grade reading one. Does that
Yeah,
make
no,
sense?
And we are trying to ensure that our schools are doing a good job of this. We're trying to help students start to own their learning more by setting goals and know how they're progressing in their learning. And so in 5th grade, while it might not meet the House Bill 3 goal and all this, we still want them setting a goal for literacy or fluency or math facts, et cetera. So we're getting better at that as a system, but we're still always.
I'll give an example that's completely separate from academics. Chisholm Trail in particular taught the concept of SMART goals with their students, K-5, and they started that concept through their social emotional learning. So they worked with their plans that they were rolling out with their counseling team, and they were very associated socially SMART goals to start to learn that concept. So what you're experiencing with your children is not tied correctly or directly to an academic goal, especially initially. They were setting them for social skills.
One of the important ones to point out also as well in the pre-K, for our BEC situation, we still need to have goals associated with that in the measures, although they're not measured on a STAR test in pre-K, et cetera. We do have assessments, and we're working on measuring their progress along the way as well with BECs. And then finally, the CCMR slide, and how plans can be aligned. You're not required to align the goal to your CCMR bonuses. The outcome bonus is a higher standard that it's a bonus that you always want to aim for students to achieve, but you can choose what is measured as a progress measure along the way. Example on that, the number of certifications kids get is a progress measure for us. The more we're increasing certifications, the more we know we have students eligible to potentially receive that. The score on the TSIA, the TSI assessment that we talked about, having the number of students increase in their performance on that and meet both the math and English target helps us achieve that college and career readiness goal. So both of those are measures along the way that we've been measuring and watching to help us ensure we're improving in our CCMR rate at the end. Are there any questions on the CCMR piece? I'd like to pause there and pull up a couple of slides just for Belton ISD, just so you can see, just to refresh your memory and how we're doing things, because I think that's the benefit of doing this in-house and not doing it at task. One second. Do any of you have any questions for Gabby or Melinda while I'm finding this?
How do superintendents and your staff keep track of the time of you're supposed to do all of this stuff? It's so much, and I just wonder, like, is there a timeline that you guys like follow?
No calendar, right?
Yes, in multiple, unfortunately or fortunately. So like as a superintendent, I have a calendar of things throughout the year that are provided to us by TASA to help us remember all of those things. In Gabby's role, we get TEA, like each role basically has a listserv that you can sign up for through TEA. So they'll push out information to you by your job title to help you comply with certain things along the way.
Good to know.
But it is a lot. And the funny thing is, all of this requires so much management and administrative positions. And then what are we judged by often? If we have too many administrative positions.
Yes. Well, the district presentation that I went to, that I won't name, they were under a conservator, but
Yeah.
they hadn't been doing this at all. So now they have to spend, like, every board meeting, they have to go over the goals and have discussions about it.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do this year right at the end, just so you're all ready and aware of it. But wanted to make sure you know how these things play out for us. You can see the goal that is listed up there, our House Bill 3 goals. Remember, our board adopted these House Bill 3 goals a while ago, and the end of the 5 years is coming up here. Interesting thing to me in all of this, what does DEA do in the middle of it? They change the assessment itself, and so that's an interesting piece about this that that'll be interesting how it all plays out. But you also see our language there. It says KPM instead of a goal progress monitor. We have KPMs that we monitor every year, and we say to you in a report, did we meet these or did we not meet these? And these are the things that we're hoping to keep us on track. I do want to point out that we pushed ourselves, and I still believe this is the right thing to do on the last one, on the CCMR, to say 100%. And the reason being on that is, yes, that's a lofty goal, and I don't know if we'll meet it by August 2024, but we're trying. And the reason being is there are multiple criteria for kids to get there. And so I want to take the excuses out of the system to be able to say, oh, no, our target is going to be each and every according to our values in our system. And so while that is a lofty target, while I know that you don't see a lot of districts say that, I believe that aligns with the values that you adopted as a school board, and it holds us accountable to say, we're really going to be about each and every kid, and we need to know the kid by need and name, and make sure that we're identifying what they need and providing that along the way. Tell me what this is, Gabby, if you remember.
This is just those goals that were just articulated in very wordy form, broken down by year. You all were presented these visuals way back when they were initially established, and they were set for the 5 years. What's really interesting about looking at this is these were set just before COVID, right? And then COVID happened in the midst of having these targets. And then the additional thing on the other end is that our accountability system has changed, including the assessment. And so we established targets for 5 years, And during that time, we had the massive event across, that we all experienced. And then we also have a massive assessment change, that the criteria for meeting these targets has not been adjusted based on statewide expectations. And so we are hearing less talk about them right now in the midst of all the changes and the state accountability controversies going on.
Again, this too will change. I think the concept of setting a goal, monitoring annual progress towards the goal, no matter what EPA does, that's good practice, and we need to keep doing that, and we will keep doing that. When things change like they have, it makes it an interesting target. So, wanted to make sure we shared directly applicable information there. We'll be talking more about those in our October workshop that we have with you as a board. I also want to point out, Becky, you can present it. No, actually, you know what? Let me do this. The next part on here is specifically about a progress monitoring calendar. And I just want to point out to y'all, Becky, you can present, I don't need to pull it up. We send you all a board planning calendar, and that outlines when we give you updates on goals throughout the year, plus all required things for the board meetings. One thing that we will be adding this year is we are going to have a brief presentation every month on academic progress. And I think it's important for us to start to hold ourselves accountable to talking about it in the boardroom. It'll be a report. We're going to do our best to get better at providing you some data along the way. We've been trying to do that. We've given you a couple of presentations during the middle of the year instead of just doing it at the end of the years. But we're going to do our best this year to try and present to you every month a brief presentation on here's the challenge we're facing, here's what we're doing about it, and here's what we know is working or not. And so just know that that's going to be coming in. I know that report piece will be a little bit longer, but I think it's important for us to try and put the academic achievement piece in the middle of our whole meeting. This monitoring calendar, I would refer to the monitoring calendar as our board planning calendar. And so I think along the way, as you're getting some of these presentations this year, and as we're updating you specifically on the goals, please don't hesitate to ask for more information. We're going to do our best to be very academically focused throughout the year this year. A monitoring report, there's an example of a TEA monitoring report. I have to applaud Gabby and her team and Melinda for helping along the way, but we're also working as a district on how we visualize data, because the charts that we frankly have given you often in the past 5 years or so, I don't think help a whole lot. And so our team has been working on that, and I think you'll see some better data visualization for monitoring reports this year as well. Lastly, student outcomes do not change until adult behaviors change, and that starts with us. That starts with team debate mentality in the boardroom, and that concludes our training for EISO this evening.
Good job.
Thank you.
What's the code?
Becca's got your code.
0039 was the one that goes with everything in case anybody needs to know.
Are you just gonna put it in for us?
I'm gonna put it in for us.
Okay.
She'll take care of it.
I was ready.
And I'll email you your certificate if you would like it, but I'll also file this away.
I'd keep it too, just in case, you know. Any questions on EISO stuff?
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, we're done.
Man, that's important.
The training is concluded, and there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 7:54 PM.